Dumping half a cup of dry beans in a jar with some salt and boiling water and adding to the pressure canner is not safe canning. I'm gonna show you how to can 3 types of beans safely. I canned garbanzo beans, kidney beans, and black beans this past week. All of my jars sealed, so they're safe to go into the pantry or can tree. I've seen a lot of rebel canning where people will just put dry beans in a jar, add boiling water, add salt, add your lid and band, and add it to a pressure canner, and that is not safe canning. You have to pre-soak beans and you have to pre-cook beans. You can do this successfully without making them soggy or mushy. Lots of people say that that's why they rebel can beans. I'm here to just remind you that rebel canning is not safe. It's not tested. So in this household, we only follow recipes from the National Center of Home Food Preservation, or Ball Canning is another good resource where they have safe and tested recipes. But for beans, we follow the USDA Guide to Home Canning. They do have an entire guide for free. They give this information out for free. I printed it out and put it in a binder. You can buy a copy of the book only from them, from their website. Amazon has fake copies. Those are not accurate. But we follow safe and tested canning recipes in this household. It is my belief that the little bit of convenience that it saves is not worth the safety of your family and of my family. Did it take longer to pre-soak and pre-cook the beans? Yes, it did. But do I have full confidence in these sitting on my shelf? Yeah, I do. This is my All-American pressure canner. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to use it because we are eventually going to change the gas stove to electric. It's really heavy, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to use this one on this stove, but I do love my All-American canner. It is awesome. I still have to do that research. That's one of the reasons we haven't upgraded our appliances yet, is because I need to figure out what stovetop I can actually use for canning. So if you can with an electric or an induction stovetop, let me know what stove you have and what canner. Thanks. I can a different type of bean each morning. We're gonna talk through the process, and I am probably gonna voice over this video. It's kind of hard to do a video for canning when the canner is running just because it's so loud. But these jars have sat on the counter for just under 24 hours, maybe like 20 hours. We are taking all of the rings off, and then we're gonna check the seals, and I'll show you how to check all the seals. But first, we're gonna talk about how to properly can beans. Beans or peas, shelled and dried, all variety. I did about 5 pounds of beans, and I got 16 jars of each. And you can also do this with peas. But you wanna place the dried beans in a large pot and cover with water. Soak for 12 to 18 hours in a cool place, and then drain the water. I highly, highly, highly recommend setting a timer for 12 hours and do not let it go a minute sooner. The first batch I did, it was like 14 to 15 hours of soaking, and that was mushy. So soak for only 12 hours. So that does take a little bit of pre-planning. Like if you know you're gonna start canning at 9 a.m., then you should start soaking your beans at 9 p.m. the night before and set an alarm so you don't forget. I have not done the quick hydration method where you can cover and sort washed beans in boiling water with a saucepan, boil for 2 minutes, and then soak for 1 hour and drain. So I can't speak to whether or not that makes them mushy. I haven't done that. Okay, so after you soak your beans for 12 hours, exactly 12 hours, you will cover with fresh water and boil for 30 minutes. I put this on high heat immediately. I let it boil. It does take, when you have a big stock pot of beans, it does take like 30 minutes for it to start boiling. So plan an extra 30 minutes to just go to something else. The second you catch it boiling and in a rolling boil, you start that 30-minute timer. So after your beans are boiled for 30 minutes, shut the burner off. You want to fill your jars with the burner off. It will stay hot enough. And meanwhile, you should also have your jars preheated. I preheat them in the dishwasher. You don't want to put hot beans into a cold jar. You'll cause thermal shock and the jars will bust. So I have a 1 hour hot water rinse cycle on my dishwasher. I will usually put the jars through that. This will also help because if they're not covered in storage, they could get dust on them and whatnot. This will clean them. After we empty the jars, they're always put in the dishwasher to be sanitized. So they're at least sanitized when they're in storage, but they could still get dusty. So we do a rinse cycle. You can also boil your jars ahead of time in a stock pot of water. That's just too much effort for me. I put them in the dishwasher, and again, I just try to time it out So I usually start my dishwasher when I start the beans boiling on the stove, because it takes about an hour to get them to boil and boil for the 30 minutes. Then by the time that hour is done for the beans boiling, then the dishwasher will also be done. I dropped my marker. So again, you want hot beans in a hot jar. So then at that point you're ready. You have your hot jars in the dishwasher that just finished up. Your beans are done boiling. They're shut off on the stove. You want to fill your jars with beans and cooking liquid. I find it easiest to fill the beans first. Obviously some liquid's going to get in there, but fill the beans up to the level that you want it to. I'm a huge fan of the wide mouth jars for canning just because it's so much easier. So I will only put beans up to like the fill line. The chickpeas are a bad example because I did have some siphoning. So I'll put the beans up to the fill line. That's when I'll get my measuring tool and then fill it up with liquid up until the 1-inch headspace. Beans require a 1-inch headspace. Then you'll use your silicone or wood tool and remove the air bubbles and then adjust the headspace if needed. And I wipe the rims of the jars with vinegar in this little container that's labeled rim juice. I add my new lids, my rings finger tight, and then I put them in the pressure canner. Now, if you've never used a pressure canner before, you should be reading your manual. Pressure canners might have a little bit different things, so this is going to be just for the All-American pressure canner. I can double stack my pint jars and I can get 16 pint jars in the canner. You also want to make sure before you add your lid that your vent pipe is clear, that there's nothing in here, there's no food stock or anything. There is an emergency valve, at least on the All-Americans, but you still want to make sure that you can literally see through this valve here. And I can see you through this valve. You can't see me. But you want to make sure you look through it before you put the lid on. Now, my gauge is broken. It reads that there's 7.5 pounds of pressure when there's actually 10 pounds of pressure, and I go by the weight pressure. So in these videos, you might see that my gauge is off. I know. You also want to make sure that you have water in your canner. So each canner is a little bit different. This one requires 3 to 4 inches of water. I marked it on my headspace tool where the 3 inches is. So then I can just stick the tool along the side and then I know how much water is in there. You do not want your canner to ever boil dry. You're just gonna have to reprocess your things and then yeah, your beans are gonna turn to mush. Or it could cause your canner to literally crack and then that pressure goes poof. So also add your water. This is when I would also add a splash of vinegar. As you can see, I forgot on my beans. So this is what happens if you don't add vinegar. This is what they should look like. If you don't add vinegar, you're just gonna get the water residue on the outside of your jars. There's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't look as pretty. I'll add my lid to the canner and I wanna make sure that the rim is equal. You don't want your lid like tipped all one direction. It's just going to cause problems later on. So you want your lid to be flat, placed on it, make sure that it's an even space around the rim on all sides. Then you will tighten the bolts on your canner. So you want to do like the front and the back one at the same time and then the diagonal ones at the same times. And then you start your pressure canning process. This is my canning manual. It's in the back of my binder and I have it open to the canning instructions just in case I ever need a refresher. So once my seal is good and I crank those bolts as much as humanly possible, I actually don't know if they're called bolts or not, but I'm gonna call them bolts. Okay, so your canner's shut, your jars are in there, you've got your water and your vinegar. You want to turn your heat source on high. Now every oven is a little bit different. I do not turn mine on to boiling high. I find it gets too hot too fast and then it causes siphoning. So I put it on 6, which is just over halfway. It does take a while to actually warm up before I get my steady stream of steam coming out of the vent pipe. You want a steady column of steam escaping from the vent pipe for 10 minutes before you place your weight on the pipe. This is what a weight looks like. It just sits right on here. This is how I know that this is 10 pounds of pressure because this is a physical weight as opposed to the gauge, which is just saying what it wants to. So basically when the pressure canner gets to 10 pounds, it's going to start to jiggle to release the extra pressure. So that's how I know that this is consistently at 10 pounds. So after you put your weight on, it'll probably be like 5 minutes until you get up to pressure, sometimes 10. Depends on how high you crank the heat. then you want to start your timer from the first jiggle of the weight. You also don't want it to jiggle more than like 3 times a minute, so you will have to adjust your heat on the stovetop as needed. My manual says the pressure regulator weight jiggles 1 to 4 times per minute. And the manual says experience with the pressure regulator weight will teach you what setting on your stove will maintain the proper pressure and how long it takes before the pressure regulator weight jiggles or rocks. It will depend on the size and how much food that you're actually canning. So that's it. Once you get your jiggle on the weight, you can set your timer. If you're under 1,000 feet, it's 10 pounds. If you're above 1,000 feet, it's 15 pounds. If you're doing pints, it's 75 minutes. If you're doing quarts, it's 90 minutes. So that's as much information that you get from the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning. They do also have a chapter on how to can. So very good read if you are new to pressure canning or water bath canning and you want to know like what you're getting into. It is easier than you think it is. I was terrified the first few times using my pressure canner. I'm pretty comfortable with it now. I am still slightly scared when I open it every time, but that's okay. So after your timer goes off, you want to turn your gas burner off completely, and then you want to let it come down to normal pressure on its own. So you'll see the gauge dial back and go down to 0. Once you see your gauge down to 0, you can take your weight off. It will release steam, so don't be afraid. I jumped the first time that I did it because I didn't know that it was going to release more steam. So you'll remove your weight, and then I usually wait another 5 minutes, and then once my 5 minutes are up, then you can break your seal and open your pressure canner, and then you can take your beans out. And you want to set them on, if you have like a stone countertop, honestly if you have like any countertop, you should put them on a towel. I'll often use like a bath towel. I used a dish drying mat this time just because that's what was close. And you set your jars on the countertop and you leave them. After about 12 hours, you can tap the lids, check the seals. Just do like your first check on the seals. So at this point, after 12 hours, if you hear a jar that's not sealed, you'll want to just put it in the fridge or the freezer, depending on what kind of jar it is. You can only freeze in jars with the straight shoulders like these. This is what it's going to sound like if it's sealed. Hear that difference? And you can hear the button. It's not sealed. And I know this is an empty jar that did not go through canning, but I have had jars that did not seal before. This is what they sound like. So sealed, not sealed. It will have that like hollow sound to it. You can also use like a spoon to tap the lids. That's probably louder. Okay, so that's method 1 to checking to see if your lid's sealed. You'll also want to push a little bit on each lid. If you can feel that button give at all, it's not sealed. So you'll just do a little push on each lid to make sure that it's sealed. The next way that I do before I wash my jars is I lift up each jar by the lid and only the lid. So the seal should be strong enough that it holds the weight of the jar. So I'm just lifting up each jar by just the lid. You don't need to lift it up super high because obviously if it is not sealed correctly and that breaks, that will suck. And you'll know pretty soon if a jar is not sealed. Okay, all of my jars have sealed that way. Now we're gonna do the third method, which is after we wash all the jars. So I'm gonna move you. So here I've got my jar of black beans that need to be washed. The reason you do this is you want to make sure that there's nothing that can get under the rim, and you don't want like food on the outside of the jar. Sometimes if you have siphoning, the outside of the jars will get gross. So you want to just clean the outside of the jar just to make sure that the outside of the jar is not going to mold. I love black beans. We eat them with tacos. We do participate in Taco Tuesday, so. Okay, so the third method after you've washed the jar is to literally just stick your fingers underneath the lid and put a little pressure. You should also not be able to open this with your hand. You should need to be able to use a can opener, so that was successful. This is also a good way to check too. Sometimes if you do a siphoning, you'll get food that's stuck under the lid of the rim of the lid, wow, and will cause it to not seal correctly. So you wanna just do like a little bit of a give just to make sure that it is sealed. When in doubt, put it in the fridge, eat it within a couple days. Or pop it in the freezer, again, if you have a straight shoulder jar like this. Lots of people will also just like fill their sinks with water. I find that to be a waste, so I'm not doing that many jars. I just do a slow trickle of water. Now my jars are all cleaned, their seals are all good. You always want to make sure that you're labeling your jars with the date and with what it is too, because there are lots of times that I'll can something and then I won't remember what it was. Like, I mean, obviously this is pretty easy to tell that this is garbanzo beans, but like, well, I guess maybe you can tell which one's kidney and which one's black. Anyways, label what is going in the jar. So I'm writing black beans and then an NS for no salt. Salt is optional in a lot of canning recipes, so if you, like for medical reasons, have to have a no salt diet, home canning your own things is really easy and really good to do. All right, folks, there you have it. This is how you can beans safely and properly, because the little bit of extra time that Rebel canning saves is not worth the safety of your family. You want to make sure that you don't lose 50% of the liquid in the jar. So I didn't have any siphoning in these beans, totally fine. The chickpeas did have some siphoning. This is what they should look like and come out as, where the liquid goes all the way up to the top. I had a few jars that lost some liquid, so these went to the front. You can use them just fine. They're still safe to eat. The only thing that would happen is that after like 6 months or so, the beans above would become discolored above the liquid. Still safe to eat. It just visually looks wrong. So that's why I put these jars to the front. We'll go through these beans in less than 6 months, but we will use these jars first. That way the discoloration doesn't throw us off. But all of my other beans came out great. And then I've got still a lot of sweet corn from the summer. I can all of my corn once a year from a corn stand that's down the road. So I usually have like 40 jars of corn to get us through the year. The corn stand doesn't typically open up until like August. So I still have not too many jars. I pulled this forward for the visual appeal. I have 10 jars of corn left. That will definitely get me through until I'm ready to can it again. All these beans will last us about 6 months. We're, for all intents and purposes, vegetarian at home, so we eat a lot of beans. Okay, real quick before I go, I just realized this as I was taking my thumbnail photo that I never talked about the double stacking of jars. Lots of people will point this out as a Rebel canning, not safe canning method. I just want to prompt my source. You can double stack jars. It's a good idea to have cardboard in between them, but it's not required. I trust the double stacking because the 3 methods that I showed you with testing a seal, we do them all again before we open each jar. Because sometimes jars in the pantry can just lose their seal. For the most part, you'll be able to know because it will visually mold and then you'll know that the food went bad. I had that happen for pumpkin last year. But just in case it doesn't, you want to make sure that it does seal properly. I double stack my jars. Do what you're comfortable with. It's okay if you're not comfortable doing it, but it is still considered safe to do so. So just a little note. So there you go. Drop any questions that you have in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them or find the answer for you. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Happy, safe canning, and I'll see you next time.